Hello there, class. I hope everyone is having a good night tonight, because we are going to be quite busy on this creature of the week. And speaking of which, greetings, creatures and humans alike. I am MagiQDog, and the creature that we're going to be learning about is... Scribble, 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 scribble. Scribbling. Scribble, scribble, scribble. Let me sit right here. Get rid of my wings. And the creature we'll be learning about is the Draugr. And this one's going to be quite an interesting creature to talk about. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? The Draugr is a powerful undead creature told by the Vikings in Norse mythology. Appearance: the Draugr appears as a rotten, reanimated corpse of a person that died. The person they once was still retains all their physical appearance, whether they were human or a humanoid at one time. But they are a reanimated corpse that has decayed with swollen, pale, or bluish bodies, wounds that show no sign of healing, ribs and bones that might appear kind of out of the body and stuff, and more. They will have glowing eyes within their sunken sockets. They will have a foul smell of death and decay. The Draugr also wear their clothing and armor that they died in. Their armor and weapons will normally show signs of past battle, or might be rusted to give off their eerie presence. And speaking of which, they always have a powerful and eerie presence that can make even the bravest of warriors fear for their lives. Role in mythology: Draugrs are told in the Norse sagas that hold accounts of what they are and what they do, with the Eyrbyshaws, Eyrbyscha. Should have had that typed in right there. In fact, give me just a second. Let's see. There we go. Okay, fix that typo. Anyways, with these two sagas being the best sagas with the Draugrs. Draugrs are the undead of those who die violent deaths, or under curses, or their own evil ways of life. The Draugrs will rise up from their graves, from the watery graves if they died out at sea, or within the moats, and they will return to the land of the living. They will live around their graves, haunting the moats that their graves reside in, or their burial places, whatever. Anyways, they often guard their treasures and horrors that are buried in their graves, and will officially attack and kill anyone that dares to come after their treasures. However, the Draugrs are also feared because they are vengeful undead, as some are known to return to their village and homes and wreak havoc. I am so sorry, typo. They could destroy people's homes, killing livestock and people, and causing those that see them to faint or even go insane if they survive the encounter. The worst part is that the Draugrs might turn some of their victims into more Draugrs themselves, through the methods of curses, or a kind of magic infection through the victim's runes. Similar to that of modern zombies in a sense. Well, Hollywood zombies in a sense, really. Anyways, there are also Draugrs out at sea, which would threaten sailors by sinking their ships or causing shipwrecks. So don't think you're safe out in the water. Draugrs are considered one of the most feared and deadlier creatures that Vikings don't want to encounter. Type of Draugrs: in Nordic regions, the Draugr is the main kind of corporeal undead around that the Vikings dread the most. But if you look into the Draugr closely, you will discover there are not just one or two, but 3 different kinds of Draugrs. It turns out that there are 3 different types of Draugrs that are separated by how they hunt and where they hunt. And here are the 3 kinds. First off is a Haugbui, or moat dweller. This is more of a stay-in-bound kind of Draugr. Although sometimes it's considered more of a reverend instead, the Haugbui, if I'm pronouncing it right, sorry. Basically, these are the ones that remains within the moats and burial sites and don't roam around. They will instead guard their treasures that rest in their graves. They are only considered dangerous if a person intrudes upon their moats to try to steal their treasure. Now the second type is the Aptrganga, or the Again Walker. You know what? I'm just going to use the English version. Anyways, these Draugrs are the kind that leave their graves and go to harm the living and cause mayhem. They are also more dangerous than the Haugbui, since they are not bounded to the graves and are free to attack whoever. Then finally, you have the Norwegian Sea Draugrs, and they are exactly as the name implies. They are the Draugrs from people that have died out at sea and have returned from the watery graves as bad omens or wreak havoc on sailors and Vikings out in sea. They are told to have seaweed on their head and appear on half-boats to warn about upcoming deaths or try to drag down others. With these kind of Draugrs, you're not safe whether you're on land or in water. Other undead warriors. Draugrs in Norse mythology are fierce undeads that haunt the living and are considered powerful warriors. But other myths and legends also told of undeads who would attack the living or are capable fighters. Here are some undeads that are eerily similar to the Draugrs. Revenants across Europe are told as reanimated undeads that are very vengeful and will attack or kill those they seek to take their revenge. The Fext from Slavic mythology are considered powerful warrior undeads that are mostly invincible in combat. Skeletons from medieval and modern times are reanimated corpses of a person's skeleton and are often depicted in Roman graves and ruins and act as guards against intruders. The Scandinavian Gjenganger are ghosts who take physical forms as corporal reference. These ghosts, like undead, will rise from their graves due to terrible deaths and will attack the living. Mummies from Egypt share similarities with Draugrs as they are reanimated corpses that roam their burial areas and guard their burials and treasures. Though in the mummies' case they roam their Egyptian tombs or guard the pharaoh's bodies, and Kai, which is the Egyptian soul by the way. And finally, while this is kind of a cheap call out, you also have all the vengeful spirits from different myths, legends, and religions that share the same mythological nature as a Draugr. These include the Irish Sluagh, Chavacho Chindi, Sumerian Edimmu, Japanese Goryo, and more dark undead spirits. These ghosts and reference who are similar to the Draugrs indicate the same fear of the undead rising back to harm the living, and rightfully so. Powers. Draugrs are powerful type of undeads with their incredible powers and abilities that make them quite a menace to even the greatest of warriors. Draugrs have supernatural bodies that grant them supernatural durability, conditioning, and more importantly, strength. The strength of a Draugr can have them easily overpower any human or animal for that matter. And they use their physical powers for their skills as warriors and fighters. Draugrs are normally seasoned soldiers of battle, so they are capable fighters that are armed with weapons and shields and armor. Wait, did I say armor twice? I meant to say weapons and shields and armor. Teaching is hard. Anyways. They are also fierce guardians that protect their hoards of treasure from any intruder. And despite being undead, they still retain their intelligence that still remain with their human memories and other intelligent factors. But other than their physical powers, Draugrs also have supernatural magical powers that make them different from other undead. For one, they can foretell past events and foresee the future, making them seers. They can also manipulate their size to allow them to grow to giant proportions. Along with changing their size, they can also change their shape as they are shapeshifters that can shapeshift into animals like cows, horses, and cats. They can make people go insane or carry in fear by their mere presence. And they can even manipulate the weather itself. These abilities, and more that I haven't even named off, is what make the Draugrs an undead adversary. Weaknesses. But despite their magical powers and warrior skills, they too have a range of weaknesses one can use to defend themselves. One way is to even prevent a Draugr from existing or rising up in the first place. The Vikings have made precautions to prevent a person from rising back from their graves, which includes placing straw under the trolls along with a pair of iron scissors resting in the chests of the dead, and tying together the big toes of the dead so they couldn't move. Another prevention method is during the funeral, where the bearers will come into the deceased's house with a coffin inside of it, and open and lower the coffin in 3 directions to make the sign of scissors. They would also remove a brick in the house to make the corpse door to let the dead fit through there before they proceed to bury the dead. This funeral ritual is important to the Vikings to keep any Draugrs from rising back up. And of course, filling up their moats and graves will help prevent them from roaming about as well. But what if the Draugr is already out and about or couldn't be prevented in the first place? Well, there are still weaknesses that can be used against them in combat. Iron is believed to ward off or harm the Draugr, since iron is a common deterrent against the supernatural and evil forces. Fire can also be a handy weapon to help against a Draugr, but irons and flames will not kill it alone. You yourself must overpower the Draugr and behead it in order to stop its rampage. Which is easier said than done, by the way. But once you do kill it, you must also burn the Draugr's body, then scatter its ashes into the sea. This is the only way to prevent it from reanimating itself again. In the Norse sagas, it was said that only heroes with pure hearts, bravery, and the strength who are capable of defeating Draugrs. However, you yourself might be the next hero if you find yourself facing a Draugr. Sure, these preventions and weaknesses may not seem much, but they are effective with dealing with Draugrs. Becoming a Draugr. The Vikings of Nordic areas have a strong belief in the Draugr and the afterlife as a whole. The belief in the 9 worlds and the souls residing in one of the afterlives, like Hell, aka the Norse underworld, or Valhalla of Asgard, where the brave souls reside, are deeply tied to the Norse culture that shaped their communities, way of life, and how they honor the dead. Excuse me, I drank some Sprite before starting the stream. Anyways, with these strict beliefs, it's no wonder one would not want to become a Draugr, especially a Viking warrior that wishes to be in the halls of Valhalla with the Aesir Gods. Even so, there are still those who end up as one of the undead. So how does one become a Draugr that roams the moats and guards their treasures in the first place? Well, one of the methods is a deceased person not lying in a horizontal position. If a corpse is sitting up or in an upright position, they can return as the undead and pretty much get back up. Another way is if a person dies in a dishonorable way, had an improper death, or met a violent end. Any factors that leads to the person's soul that left them unsatisfied with their death, or still had attachments to the living like unsettled business, is the main way for a person to become a Draugr. From drowning out at sea, dying dishonorably out in the battlefield, getting murdered and the deceased was to avenge, and even not having a proper burial grounds. These are just examples of what makes a person come back from beyond the afterlife. Of course, one doesn't just have a horrible way to go to become a Draugr too. Another main way for a person to become a Draugr was if they was a greedy or evil person with a mean personality. Nasty and rude people who are bad to the bone are more likely to become a Draugr after they die compared to those who have ended up dying horribly. So watch out, Karens. You might become a Draugr yourself. But anyways, the last method, however, is by far one of the worst ways to turn. Just like how Hollywood zombies can infect others, a Draugr is capable of turning other people into Draugrs by inflicting them with their own magic, or killing their victims, which will raise the likelihood of a person becoming a Draugr. Also, ones that are affected by the curse will, well, not just by a random curse, just any curse in general, will also likely become a Draugr themselves. With so many different ways for one to become an undead, it's no wonder the Vikings took every precaution and safety measure to keep the dead put in their final resting place. Famous Draugrs. The sagas from oh my goodness gracious, I cannot say Ode. The sagas from Old Norse are collective stories and histories filled with historical figures and legendary beings across Iceland and Scandinavia. And even the Draugrs are mentioned in these tales. But of course, not every Draugr is as famous as the gods, like Odin and Thor, or feared like Fafnir and Fenrir. However, there are some Draugrs who became so fierce and so infamous that their names are told in these stories. The first one is Thrainn. He was an evil godlike sorcerer and king, from whom became a Draugr after his death to continue his tyranny. He was eventually slain by the hero Hromundr, Hromundr. Anyways, he also took his sword, Mistletoe. Now the next one is Thorolf the Lamefoot. Thorolf was once a feared warrior of Iceland who ended up having quite an estate, but an injury to his foot made him bitter and cold. When he died of old age, he returned as a Draugr despite the townfolk's best effort to give him a proper burial. He terrorized his town with killing crops and livestock, and terrorizing the people to the point that even his wife and family members died from his horrors. Now the next one isn't technically named, but is still a famous Draugr nonetheless, whom I like to call the Shepherd Draugr. This Draugr came from the Eyrbyggja saga. You know, the one saga I saw before that starts with an E. Anyways, in this saga, there was a shepherd that was attacked and killed by a Draugr who broke his neck. The shepherd rose up as a Draugr himself the next night to cause terror as well. Now the next one is Aran, from the Aran Asmund story. Aran and Asmund were sworn brothers. The two made a blood oath that whoever died first, the other would sit in their moat for 3 days. And so Aran ended up dying first, and Asmund watched him alongside his dog and horse. Aran later on soon revived as an undead, and ate the dog and the horse, and attacked Asmund. Asmund carried out his promise, and beheaded Aran before he was rescued by a Swedish king who wished to raid his tomb for wishes. Next is Hrapper the Greedy. He was once a Hebridean? I guess that's how it's pronounced. He was once a Hebridean man who moved to Iceland after he was kicked out of his homeland. He would constantly argue with neighbors until he died of old age, which I kinda understand why he got kicked out of his hometown in the first place. Anyways, he pretty much returned as a Draugr who terrorized anyone that came near his home, so the town people eventually moved his dead body far away during the day when he wasn't active. Now the next Draugr isn't really a typical one, as this one was actually a good Draugr. According to the Nishaz saga, Gunnar Hamundarson was a famous hero and chieftain, seemed to have returned as a Draugr, but he was more of a peaceful and joyful one than a vengeful and violent one. Whew. However, the next Draugr, who wasn't technically violent physically, but still caused a lot of death, and this was Thorgunna. She was a peaceful woman who was cursed and died from a storm that rained blood, and so she arranged her own funeral and treasures within the Sluagh church, with the exception of her bedliners that needs to be burned. However, Thorwald, the man that was supposed to carry out her wishes, gave the bedlinens to his wife instead. So during her funeral, a fierce storm forced the bearers to shelter into a couple's home. As the men discussed their plans, they found the naked Thorgunna making food for the men. Knowing the dangers of angering her as a Draugr, they blessed and ate the food. She returned to her coffin and was buried as planned. But after that, more people died the same way Thorgunna did, and they became Draugrs themselves. Thorwald finally ended the curse when he fulfilled Thorgunna's wishes and burned the bed linens. Now the final Draugr is the most famous one of all, which is Glamr. According to Grettir's saga, Glamr was a shepherd who was hired to work in Dornhall's farm. But after Yuletide, when he did not done the fasting because apparently he doesn't believe in that kind of stuff, he was attacked and killed by another mythical creature called the Wight. Now, Dornhall and the townfolks couldn't receive his body, so Glamr never got a proper burial. This caused Glamr to rise back as a Draugr, and slowly he became a menace to the community, where he started from appearing and scaring people to destroying houses, driving cattle mad, and killing people by crushing them to death. Soon, the hero and Draugr slayer Grettir, who previously killed another Draugr who was called Kar the Ode, who was just a Draugr that guarded his mountain treasure. So yeah, he pretty much was a Tomb Raider at this point. Anyways, this guy pretty much heard of Glamr and ventured to Doranhal's farm to face him. Glamr and Grettir fought, where Glamr mocked the hero for believing that he could slay him. But Grettir, I am mispronouncing his name, so I do apologize in advance. But anyways, he was able to wrestle Glamr down and beheaded him. However, before he was beheaded, Glamr cursed Grettir by him getting weaker and having a horrible death as he watched from beyond the living. Grettir burned Glamr's body and scattered his ashes into the sea. However, later on, Glamr's curse took Grettir's life, where he was ambushed and killed by other enemies. And with that, these are the most famous of all Draugrs. And rightfully so, to be honest. Popularity. The Draugrs are an interesting kind of undead with a rich history told in Sagas of the Old Norse. And these stories of them that have survived up to the modern times. And they are now told in different medias and pop cultures, from movies to games to books and more. Sorry, right. Anyways, in movies, the horror movies 2018 Draugr, 2019 Draugr, and 2022 the Draugr bring these undeads to life as the main monsters of the movie. The Norseman movie features a fight scene with a Draugr that the main protagonist fought against. And in 2024, The Damned had a Draugr who tormented the residents of a winter fishing port. With TV series, the series Vikings features Draugrs as more of a ghost type than a reanimated corpse. Sleeping Hollow Season 3 features them as a rare undead type. Even the Game of Thrones got the White Walkers, who seem to be inspired by Draugrs. With cartoons, the only one I can really find is the one that Hilda from the Netflix series Hilda encountered. It was a sea Draugr who was a captain that was named Dragon Captain, along with his crew. However, the Scooby-Doo comics also features a Draugr who was a former queen in disguise. By the way, I kind of noticed recently that a lot of mythical creatures also appear in the Scooby-Doo comics, which is like, huh. Anyways, I was not able to find any Draugrs within anime and manga, unfortunately, but hopefully one of y'all could find one for me. Let me know in the comments section whenever I get this uploaded on YouTube. Anyways, video games feature some Draugrs as bosses and enemies. The Elder Scrolls games have Draugrs as mummified undeads of fallen warriors that roam ancient burial sites. They exist from the Blood Moon expansion all the way up to Skyrim. The 2018 God of War had Kratos and his son often come across Draugrs as common enemies. The Witcher games features the sea Draugrs known as Drags. In World of Warcraft, the Faiku race are based from the Draugrs legends, and in Valheim, they are a common enemy that appears in swamps and crypts. And with Age of Mythology retold, they have the Draugrs who fought alongside the god Earl. With books, the Lord of the Rings series by J.R.R. Tolkien, there are the Barrow Wights that seem to be inspired by the Draugrs. Draugr by Arthur Slate features a vengeful Draugr who terrorized Sarah and her cousins. Anyways, a Draugr is a cursed guardian that protects a forbidden treasure in the Grimwood Chronicles Secret of the Draugr by S.T. James. And Donald Cleese collected short stories, which includes one of the Draugrs in his book, The Draugr and Other Shadows of Decay. The undead are even featured in songs, like Peyton Paris' Viking-style song Draugr. It is a good one too, I recommend looking it up. There are also other songs called Draugrs by Active Impalement, and Hafilion, if I pronounce that right, and Saganbringer. Whew, that was a lot. But we can now end this out with a conclusion. The Vikings told of the undead that could return to the land of the living. They could cause mayhem, guard their treasures, and infect the living to turn them into the dead. These warriors of the moat and the sunken warriors of the sea will face any brave man and make those who see them afraid for their lives. From the sagas that are written to the rune stones that are left, they warn and take precautions of these unrestful corpses that walk again. So if you find yourself in the frozen lands and find buried treasure, be aware, for you might have a fight for your life against the Draugr. And with that, that concludes our creature of the week. So, what do you guys think of the Draugrs? Do you think they're as nasty as they say? Do you think there are way too many ways of becoming a Draugr? Would you like to wrestle one to the ground? Let me know in the comments section whenever I load this up. And with that, that concludes the Draugr. Now, our next creature of the week, however... Ooh, we're gonna be talking about one of my favorite mythical creatures from Inuit mythology. And he's a good big boy, yes he is! He's a good big boy, yes he is. Y'all probably have no idea what the beep I'm talking about, huh? Anyways, we'll find that out later on. But yeah, that was pretty much fun with this creature of the week. But alas, it is time for us to end this class. So with all that out of the way, thank you guys for coming on this fantastic creature of the week stream. I hope y'all had as much fun as I did, as we got to learn about... hang on a second. As we got to learn about the Draugr and their undead warriorly ways. Yeah, I probably could have come up with something better than that. But anyways, if you wish to see more of mythical creatures like these, check me out on my Twitch page, check me out on Twitter, also check me out on my Game and React and my main YouTube channel, and leave a like and subscribe while you're at it. And with that, I bid this show adieu, and this class adjourn. So see you guys. So long. Bye-bye. Okay, bye.